So, Kim, what has been in the news so much, of course, for the last 6 to 8 months is the CMS ruling for the Inflation Reduction Act. Uh, how is some of the work that ICER is doing informing or influence the CMS approach and vice versa?
Yeah, so I'm getting a lot of questions about this lately. And first, let me provide a little bit of context for anybody watching that isn't as familiar with Medicare drug price negotiation. So, the Inflation Reduction Act gives CMS the power to set maximum fair prices for, at this point in time, 10 drugs. And we know a whole list of factors that CMS will consider, and Peter Newman went through them in the excellent interview you did with him about a month ago. What are those factors? Some of them are therapeutic advantage, unmet need, clinical effectiveness. What we don't know is how CMS will weight these factors to ultimately get to what it's going to call a maximum fair price. And it could be weighting these factors and considering them in a value-based way, or it could be looking at them in a cost minimization way. So lots of conversations about how this could happen, how this should happen. And ICER, of course, wants to be relevant in this conversation. I mean, this is their bread and butter, setting value-based prices, looking at the evidence, thinking about what a value-based price might look like. So ICER recently released a report where they looked at two of the products that are currently on that list for Medicare drug price negotiation, Eliquis and Xarelto. And the questions I'm getting the most often is, what does CMS do with this report? What might they do? So what do we see in this report? We see some familiar things, some new framing for ICER, and then we see something that's really hard to interpret. So the familiar things, we see a very familiar structure to what an ICER value assessment report would typically look like. There's comparative and cost effectiveness. There is a qualitative narrative around patient-centered factors. Familiar structure. There's a little bit of new framing. The new framing, and this isn't completely new, but ICER tends to focus on what is known as the quality adjusted life year, the QALY, in its cost effectiveness framing. And CMS is banned from using the QALY in Medicare drug price negotiations because here in the US, as Dan Ohlendorf likes to say, the QALY is everyone's favorite punching bag. There are many stakeholders that believe that the QALY is discriminatory because it looks at 1 year of life in perfect health. So anyone who is not in perfect health could be, as the punching bag narrative goes, could be discriminated against. Mm-hmm. ICER has another metric that it uses in its value assessment, and this metric is called the equal value life year. And both of these metrics are in ICER's reports. What has shifted in the framing for the CMS assessment, and this is also new framing in ICER's updated value assessment framework, is that the equal value life year is now front and center. So while reports have historically included both, and going forward, they'll continue to use both, the EVLEG, equal value life year gained, EVLEG is its acronym nickname, is front and center in the CMS report, and it will be front and center moving forward in the value assessment framework, which I think is part of ICER's nod to be relevant for CMS's activities. Mm-hmm. So that's what's familiar. That's the new framing. The part that's hard to interpret. So ICER's reports typically include a value-based price estimate. Mm-hmm. Payers know what to do with this. They use it as a leverage point in their price negotiation process. Mm-hmm. This report for CMS, the special assessment, does not include a value-based price estimate. It includes a price premium. And everyone's like, what do we do with this price premium? Mm-hmm. So first, why do we have a price premium? We have a price premium because ICER does not have all of the information in order to calculate a relevant value-based price for CMS. We know list prices for products. What we don't know is the net price that
Mhm.
CMS is paying. And this is, of course, the price after rebates, discounts are taken out, all of those strange incentives that we've got in our healthcare system. So we don't know the net price that CMS is paying.
Mhm.
CMS knows this information. So what did ICER do? ICER said, what are some reasonable therapeutic alternatives? And they selected two representative therapeutic alternatives, warfarin and dabigatran. And we don't know which one CMS will select, if they'll select those, if they'll select others. So ICER selected those and estimated price premiums for Eliquis and Xarelto that are relative to those two therapeutic alternatives. So what do you do with this? If you're CMS, you're looking at warfarin, you look at the price premium for Eliquis relative to warfarin. Your CMS, you have a net price estimate. You can add the price premium to that net price that you, CMS, know and come up with a representative value-based price based on ICER's view of the factors, the cost effectiveness, et cetera. So that was pretty complicated. So a couple things I want to add there. First, the therapeutic alternative matters. If you look at the numbers in ICER's report, you see different price premiums depending on what it's being compared to, depending on the product that we're looking at. So what CMS selects for its therapeutic alternative is really going to drive this. The other thing I want to emphasize, and this is based on my understanding of ICER's intent, is that even once you have the information to back out that value-based price, that value-based price is not intended to represent a maximum fair price or a price ceiling. It is only intended to be an example of what a value-based price might look like. So where does this leave us? Back to the question, what does CMS do with this? So time will tell what CMS does with this. And will CMS use this information to help estimate a value-based price, or is CMS really driving towards cost minimization? And this matters because of the incentives we have in our system, what those signals will do for future innovation. When we aren't making value-based purchasing decisions, then we're not incentivizing value-based innovation and development decisions.
If we're 5 years down the road with these different factions assessing value, how's it going to sort out? What do you think is going to be included and kept, and what do you think is going to be jettisoned because they work at cross purposes, or they're not fully transparent, or they're simply just not useful?
That's a great question. I wish I knew the answers to that. One thing that I really hope to see is I hope to see some of the most glaring misaligned incentives that are in the Inflation Reduction Act to be fixed. Right now we've got an issue with orphan disease and rare indication, and we've got an incentive in place that is going to discourage people from follow-on indications. It might interfere with the sequencing of what indication does a manufacturer develop first. That's a real area of need for patients. That's where we're most at risk of seeing things falling off in terms of the innovation and development. And that's one area where I hope we can look back in 5 years and say, oh, we fixed that misaligned incentive. I also hope that we look back and see that CMS is focusing on value-based considerations, not what were the research and development costs? I mean, that sounds like such a logical thing to look at, but it's really not. You can't just say this was the research and development cost for this particular product. Manufacturers are developing so many products in a portfolio, and so many of them are failures. They never make it to market. And the research and development costs that go into all of those failures, which are not failures per se. They're failures in that they don't get to the market, but they all provide information that can help us make future innovations and developments. The cost to invest in all of that research and development goes into a single product's research and development. And it's very hard to provide a meaningful R&D estimate.